Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us today. We have a very special guest, Kim Ingleby. She's a fantastic mind-body coach, a very experienced coach who uses a number of modalities. She's an author and she's also a TEDx speaker. A fantastic talk that she did, really inspiring, really motivating speech. You never see it. I suggest you go and watch it as soon as you got time. It will really motivate you. I'm glad to have on the show. Kim, thank you for joining us on tonight's show. Thanks very much for coming on board.
Oh, my pleasure. It's really exciting. I'm looking forward to sharing some stories and some tips and advice with your listeners. So thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I watched your TED talk, and I find it really, and people watching probably won't know what I'm talking about. So tell us a bit about the build up to it. I mean, you in 18 minutes or so, you talked about so many things that have been instrumental in your development as a coach, as a human being, as a person. Kim, you'd been through what anyone would describe as a very challenging situation, and your resilience, your tenacity. Tell us a bit about the build up to what happened and how you transformed yourself in becoming this mind-body coach.
Okay, so well, I think lots of people listening probably have had hard things that they've had to get through. So I think mine's just another story in a way. I was always doing mind and body coaching before this happened, but in 2013 I got something called Weil's disease, and that was from swimming in open water, and it's basically from probably rat's urine, and it's a bacteria and a virus, attacks your organs, attacks your neurology. And since then I've had something called encephalitis, which affects the frontal lobe of my brain and causes quite a lot of sort of problems in my day-to-day living. So yeah, in 2013, I didn't even know who my name was. I pretty much died, and it was a bit of a challenge, really. And TEDx came around, TEDx Bristol, to do a talk on overcoming adversity and how to be brave and how to really get your life back on track when things have happened that are totally unplanned, and sort of take your life in a completely different course. And that's really how it came about. And yeah, the TEDx talk was an amazing opportunity. It was challenging, and I think you've listened to it and found it really useful. So yeah, that's sort of how it began.
Yeah, very much so. And no, I found it really inspiring, and I've used the story. I've mentioned the story in a couple of courses that I've run for people who are going through adversity. I've mentioned to them to go watch the talk, and I speak for public speaking groups too, and I mentioned to people and point towards that direction to show that the strength of willpower. And I think that with yourself and the way you spoke and how you sort of managed to overcome that adversity to keep developing and keep going forward is phenomenal, Tim. And prior to that, you were doing coaching, you were doing the stuff that you do now. How pivotal was that experience? And in terms of meaning, in terms of your own development, we don't wish these things on anybody, and I think certain experiences in life do sculpt us. How did that influence what you do now as a mind-body coach? What you're doing before, what you do now, any changes in what you do and your approach, and how did you use the skills that you learned before to overcome the issue, or did you use the skills that you knew before to help you around the issue that you went through?
Oh, wow. So how to answer that? Lots of questions in there. Yeah. So I think maybe to help the listeners, like where I began was when I was much younger. Like many people, I suffered really low kind of self-esteem, self-confidence, didn't really kind of like the person that I was, but I was riding horses professionally for Scotland, 3D eventing. So I had this weird mix of having really low self-esteem and body confidence from like a female in myself. But then in a sports performance point of view, I was really confident. I knew what I needed to do to deliver, and I loved my sport. So that's really what started me off in my career. There was a gap in training horse riders themselves, not the horses, to get the riders fit and mentally strong. And then I felt that there was a huge gap for particularly women, being a female, on body confidence and self-esteem. And I felt there was a real sort of link there. and I also wanted to set up my own business. So I went and studied international business management. Then I did all my physical training, so the personal training, sports therapy, sports rehabilitation, nutrition therapy. Then I did my NLP Masters, hypnotherapy. So I did all of that, and it was with this real kind of passion and desire to help others feel like how I felt, but knowing that a lot of people did feel like that. And I wanted to find the skills and tools to make people realize that just as they are right now listening, they're good enough, even if they don't think they are. And then how could I help them facilitate like what they really wanted to do, those wishes, dreams, what if I could, maybe. And that's really kind of how it developed, and sort of just progressed until 2013. And then I think when the encephalitis and vials happened, obviously it made me stop. So it was interesting when you were saying like you kept pushing through. I didn't, to start with. I really stopped. I had no choice, and I had to relearn a lot of social skills and how to have conversations with people, and still those are things that I find really challenging. But fortunately the sort of logical knowledge part of my brain is still operating really well. So from a work point of view, that's really exciting, because what the whole experience gave me was a huge sense of vulnerability, which was really challenging and still is challenging, but then a whole load of empathy with people that I had before, but I was almost too scared to share that empathy and share my story for the fear of judgment and rejection and everything that everybody has. So when it happened, I think the last sort of 2 years especially has been a real journey, which a lot of people say, but a real journey of like, right, you've got to own where you are now, and it's not where you thought you were going to be, and how are you going to move forwards with your life. And I think I spent 2 years just literally going day by day, and before the vials I was very much on like, you've got to set your goals, you've got to take action, have a bit of downtime, but keep moving forwards. And now I think I've learned the balance of really helping people where they are right now in their life, and giving them the appropriate tools, support and empathy to help them where they are right now. And that's really, really exciting. And I think the best thing from it all is that it's just enhanced my passion for what I do, and kind of made me feel more vulnerable, but also more brave, because I just want to make a global difference and help as many people as I can. And kind of sounds crazy saying that, like when I hear myself saying that, but that's what I truly believe, because I just see their potential in people, and I want to help in whatever way I can. I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, that does indeed. It's very interesting stuff. And for me, when I work with people, one of the things I look for is them to get meaning out of a situation and normalize whatever they're going through, in the sense that the brain is working the way the brain works. It's the perfect storm, a cocktail of experiences that brings us to where we are, biologically, sociologically, psychologically. And wherever we are in life, whatever adversity we face, whatever that might be to anybody, and everyone's got this resilience, we get meaning, then we can start applying interventions. And I can see that you've definitely got meaning from that. And I certainly think it's really important for anyone who's going for anything to get some sort of meaning. And we heal others, we heal ourselves too, to a point as well. But what's quite fascinating is what you mentioned earlier too, Kim, prior to going through that major adversity, you talked about, and you're a top class athlete, and you're a great athlete now, and you competed at a high level, and prior to when you first started your journey, you're a top athlete. For anyone from the outside looking in, they'll think, Kim, what confidence issues? And I know you wasn't in your sport, but you mentioned away from sport. From someone outside looking in, they're probably going to be thinking, and I hear this a lot whenever I do calls and sessions, and for people outside looking in, they find it hard to understand that we're all human beings. We all have things that are going on in our mind. People looking in will think, well, Kim, what are some of the confidence issues that, if you don't mind sharing, that you faced, and that you sort of, people come to you with help with? Because people can be very judgmental in terms of, and I used to hear a lot when I used to work in sport at the highest level. I still do now, I'm on as a consultant, but I used to work in sport directly. I used to hear people sometimes on the radio criticize certain performers I was working with, not realizing they're human beings. They go through bereavement, they go through loss, they go through tragedy, and they sort of equated their fortune for doing what they were doing, love doing, with they should be happy all the time, without realizing they're just human beings. And what are some of the things that you, in your mind, and also what you help people with, Kim, around confidence and judgment? What are some of the things that you could sort of share, if you don't mind sharing, just to give people that enlightenment in terms of what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great question. And when I'm working with, like, I work with elite athletes on Olympic teams, I work with media and celebrity people, and then I work with everyday people. And my everyday people are like, why are you working with us when, you know, you work with these athletes? And kind of my athletes or my media people are like, oh, I shouldn't have these problems because I'm doing all of this, and people think I shouldn't have these problems. And the really kind of humbling thing that I find is that I think it's part of human nature to have like fears and doubts. And I think a lot of us try and fight them and feel like we shouldn't have them. If we're having, you know, if everything's good, we shouldn't still have these doubts, and if everything's challenging, then we should fight these doubts. But actually they're really normal. And so what I'm trying to do with everybody that I work with and myself is to understand how potentially you limit yourself to maybe keep yourself safe. And if you can understand how and why you do that and become aware of when you're doing that, you can start to own those limits and therefore reduce them and move away from them to a point of like content. But I was doing a workshop at the weekend, and I was talking to people and saying, I think a lot of people spring from like, oh, I'm not good enough, and self-sabotage and all of this, to like, oh, I'm having a great happy day. Stepping stones in the middle, and the stepping stone is getting to a point of, you know, I'm okay as I am, and these things make me happy, and these are the triggers that make me not do the best for myself. And how can I start to move towards like what I want to feel and do and be? And I think to kind of accept yourself is not normal. So it then gets you to move into a place where the majority aren't, because it's quite normal to talk about, you know, your fears and your doubts and not being good enough, and, you know, not looking how you want to. And so in a weird way, it's kind of like good, although it's not good. And it's harder to get into that uncomfortable bit and go, actually, I'm okay as I am. And, you know, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I think a lot of people wrap themselves up safely in between not failing, but also not sort of potential. And so my role with anybody is to try and help them, you know, move away from that limit and move towards what the potential is, and not limit either way. So a lot of my, say, athletes will limit themselves on not truly succeeding because they kind of fear that success. And then some of, say, my everyday people are fearing the failure. So they have a few strategies that keep them okay, but it's still limiting themselves. So in essence, I don't mind who I work with, as long as together we agree that they're ready, you know, that they've got some time. And I think this is a conversation that, if you're listening, it's like, if you've got loads of stress on at the moment, just actual stress you can't manage, maybe you're looking after somebody, maybe you've got work changes, maybe you're moving house, it's kind of not the time to then force yourself to do some, you know, personal development and growth. That needs a bit of space as well. So whenever I'm working with someone, I'm like, is this in your top 3 priorities? Because if it is, we've probably got some space, you've got some space to make the changes happen, and therefore kind of celebrate with yourself that you've done it, rather than go, oh, it didn't work.
That's really interesting stuff. And when people come to see you, Kim, I know this is a very general question, a very, very generalized question. What are some of the fears that they have, and what do they bring to you, Kim? What do they bring to you in terms of fear, and what outcomes are they looking for? I know everyone's going to have a different outcome, different goal, but around fear, what sort of fears do they present you with? What exactly are they afraid of in general? What's any recurring fears?
So it's a general question, but it's a common theme. The fear is I'm not good enough. Everybody's better than me. If I am successful, it's all going to fall apart. And I'm totally overwhelmed with information around like health, wellness, and performance, or I'm overwhelmed with life and I don't know how to cope. Like that's whoever it is. If you chat down with them, that's the sort of the baseline fears that come out. And the outcome that they want is they want to feel happy in themselves. They want to feel quieter in their mind, and more content, have more energy, have better sleep, and then from the high performance side, you know, get the results that they want and they know that they can, but they're not achieving. And then from a life point of view, start to do the things that they keep saying, I wish I could do every year, but they're not actioning and they're not kind of creating the space for. So the first point that they want is just to feel happy, which sounds quite like big picture and maybe sort of I don't know, a bit alternative, but it is actually, you know, what everybody comes to me, there's a sense of discontent in them. And I think because I've shared the vulnerability and that discontent in myself, and I've sort of like learned that if I'm brave and can share that, it means that people can relate and go, oh, well, you know, I do get it, I have been there. You know, I still have days, because I still have phases of the encephalitis that affects me. So I have phases where I go through that cycle of like self-doubt and fear and vulnerability, and then have to pop out the other side. And so it's kind of like a continual learning for me, which actually is then in an excited way, like pulling others along and going, come on, we can all do this. And you can do whatever it is that you want to do. So yeah, it's good but hard, but that's better than just hard and not good.
Yeah, no, for sure, definitely, and that's made me feel better already. Getting to know that someone like yourself who does so much and you know goes through these things as well, and it normalizes it. And certainly, I get times when I have fear, and fear is natural. It means the brain's working really, really well, natural and normal. We've got this brain that's evolved over a long period of time. We live in evolution, and it still recognizes threat, whatever that threat might be, and the brain.
Yeah, exactly. I have to jump in there and those agree, because before I used to think, oh, I have to get it all right so that I'm presenting this like perfect package, and you know, there's a lot of media pressure and things in sort of health and wellness. And then I was like, yeah, but fear matters, because it's there for a reason. It's either like, hey, you're doing way too much, and you know, your reptilian brain's going like, I need some downtime, and that's cool, and you need to listen to me. Or it's like, this crazy goal that you want to do really matters, so we're going to give you a bit of fear as well, because like fear and courage for me come together. And so, you know, if you didn't hear it, you're talking about stretch goal, because like fear should, so it's know themselves, so that they understand, you know, how that pattern works for them, but also liking that the person they are, so they can look after themselves. And then knowing what I talk about with my clients is it sort of good fear and good stress, or have you tipped over into that kind of adrenal stress that's not helpful, and it's wasting and draining energy, and having that kind of barometer, which is different for everybody, and it's just a self-awareness thing of going, right, where is it helpful and you need to keep moving, and where is it unhelpful and you need to rein in whatever you do, which kind of sabotages it and makes it negative.
Yeah, that's really interesting stuff. And you know, before my time, we used to have dinosaurs roaming the earth. A long time before my time, and that was a danger we faced back then. And we'd fight, we'd freeze. And these days we don't have the dinosaurs. We've got other things, other dangers that we see. And the world that we live in, I think, at least in my opinion, doesn't lend itself really well for that part of the brain. The limbic system, we kind of always assessing danger. That danger is not a dinosaur. The danger could be a bill, could be an email, could be a deadline, could be expectation, could be illusion of the way we think life should go life. We've got a planning life at 20-year-old when our life to do this doesn't meet expectation, and we feel that threat and danger. So there is that, I think, for the brain. But also the thing is too, it's been able to adjust the sails. It's being able to say, you know what, this hasn't worked out, but it's taken where I need to be, and wherever I am is where I need to be, and I'll move forward to where I want to go. And we sort of keep adjusting the sails in the sailing boat, and just keep going. Sometimes it is a case of going with the flow and having a goal, and being flexible in achieving the goal, and also recognizing that fear can be useful as long as it's not leading to a maladaptive life. If life becomes maladaptive and we sort of have social avoidance and we start to isolate ourselves longer than we need to, then we got to start being focused on what we can do to move forward, because under a lot of stress and a lot of fear, we need people who don't do well. And I think from the point of view that I'm a big believer in creating experiences with people in coaching and therapy. Each session is treatment plan and case formulation, but I think for experiences we learn, Kim, I think that didactic has its place. The only thing is that if didactic works in the way we'd like it to work, there's one book that will solve every problem in the world. So I'm a big believer in experiences for people to help them overcome the fear. So for example, if we've got a fear of presentation, then perhaps consider doing a presentation, even if it's to nobody, to the plants outside, as a way of experiencing that, and even if it's to join a group. And it's really interesting that you say that, because there was a woman who I was doing a seminar tour around the world recently, and she was very experienced, Kim. She had a wealth of knowledge. She had, I believe, a PhD. She had so many qualifications. She was in her late 60s. Phenomenal woman, great woman. We had a chat, and she said to me, she goes, she wants to release her first book. And I said, well, go for it. You're a very intelligent person. I'm sure you got a lot to offer people. And she goes, I just can't find the confidence. And then she turned around to me and said that, you've written a number of books, haven't you? I said, yeah, I have. I've had a go. She goes, aren't you afraid to release the books about what people will say about you? And I said, I thought for a moment, wow, now that you mentioned that, should I be? And she goes, I admire you for having putting out there. And I said, I'll give you an insight. I said to her, an insight, for me, it's about the message. It's not about the book. If one person reads it and a million people criticize, but one person gets a lot out of it, then it's job done, really. And I said to her, the irony was that I didn't start my education until later in life. I've been a lifelong learner now. I've studied so many things over many years, but it wasn't until 23 I started my journey. They called me a mature student at the time. But in school, I struggled. I had no academia. I was sports focused. I could barely read and write at 23 when I first started my university journey. And that was quite frightening. And not long after, I released a book, and I had to learn grammar. I didn't know a verb, a noun. Didn't even know the alphabet at 23. And the reason I use that story is that when is the right time, Kim? When is the right? Yeah. Sometimes you've got to put it out there. Yeah.
I think the time is right. People often say, when the time is right, or when I achieve this, I'll feel this. And I think from your experiences in life and then my experiences, you get a different sense of time. And it's like, when I'm, this much lighter or this much fitter, I'll feel this. And I think I realized when everything was taken away, it makes no difference. Like, it has to come from within. And yes, the externals of when you're lighter or fitter or more healthy, or you've achieved this, like you potentially may be happier, but you have to learn how to like yourself in that process, not think it will come at the end of the journey, because often it doesn't. And when you're thinking about like what's the right time to do something, I think it's when it keeps coming into your mind. And you keep thinking like, I really need to do that. And it's that tipping point of grabbing that moment and just committing to it. And I can relate to the book. Like, I've always been told through the sports side I should write a book around the Gain the Edge performance stuff that I do. So I started writing the book, and I relate to the lady you sort of talk about. And I thought, oh, no one will read it. And I sort of found the online stuff quite vulnerable. And I wrote the first draft, and the lady who was helping me was like, well, this is great, but it's going to take you forever, because my brain works much slower and it finds it harder to coordinate things. So then she said, could you do something to learn from the process? And the two things that were great with this was, I knew that if I wanted to write a book, I had to go and find a specific coach that specialized in self-publishing, because I wanted to self-publish it rather than find a publishing house. So I chose to invest in that, which was invaluable. And B, that then can it happen. And so then I created this little self-funded book that's just 52 tips to feel good. And it's about me and my rescue dog is the story, but the tips are appealing to everybody. I crowdfunded it. I give profit to charity for mental health and dogs. But the whole story behind that is just that I had to get out of my own way. There was so many times during the 6-month timeline I gave myself that I could have given you or anyone listening valid reasons that they would have nodded their head and gone, yeah, it's okay, you didn't do it. Like, I knew I could have given totally valid reasons, but in my heart, in myself, in my brain, I knew that they weren't valid. I knew that the limit was to do with my fears. And it was kind of like, you can't give them those reasons because that's not being true to you. You've got to get this done. You've got to put it out there. And as you said, you've got to put it out with the message of the intention of what you want to achieve, which was a simple little book to make people smile, to grow their inner happiness, to remove self-doubt. And, you know, it doesn't need to be big like that. If someone's listening and thinking, I just want to feel better in myself, that's your commitment. It's like, come off this and write down, what do I need to do to feel better, and who can help me with this? Like, don't be scared to ask for help. I always kind of thought I shouldn't. And then I've just learned that, you know, asking for help, investing in that, it makes you stronger, and it makes you better, in inverted commas, for everyone around you. And for me, it's invaluable.
You know, I agree. That's a really good point, Kim. I think that's a really good point for me, because sometimes we're afraid to ask for help. And I think that two minds are better than one. And I've been very privileged in my career to have some great mentors, some of the best, and they've been so helpful to me, my development as a person as well as a professional. And many, many years ago, when I first started presenting, doing presentations and teachings, going back a good 15 or more years ago, I would be so vulnerable speaking to people, and I could compete to as many people as you want. From a crowd point of view, as an athlete, I was comfortable competing because they were away from me. I was dissociated. I could get in the zone and I could compete. I was almost like in a state of hypnosis competing, and it was wonderful. Put me in a room and speak to 3 or 4 people, I was like, I was back turned, literally had my back turned. I couldn't face them. I felt so vulnerable and open. And I joined a speaking group, and I joined for a while. It helped me a lot, and that helped me develop. I left the speaking group eventually, and I became a speaker. I joined again a couple of years ago just to sort of be around that sort of environment, and I enjoy being there. I enjoy competing and speaking, and we all have our own vulnerabilities, and I think you're right in what you say. Sometimes, you know, for me, even at 17, when my goal was to compete around the world and travel to Europe and base myself in Europe as an athlete, I found a coach that really helped me so much. And as a 17-year-old, I'd work a part-time job to fund somebody, and he had a background in NLP and psychology, and little I realized that what he was helping me with athletically would help me so much, but the input he'd provide me with, the experiences he would give me as a coach, had that background in NLP, would serve me for a lifetime. And that sort of led me down the path to do NLP hypnosis, really, because I realized how powerful it was. And he'd give me these tasks to do. I didn't know what they were at the time, but it wasn't until years later when I was teaching it, I realized, actually, that's why I was trying to do this, that, and the other. And it would have been chance and coincidence, I don't know. But I agree with what you say there. I think it's really important that, because if we want to get in shape, then we can get a personal trainer that can help us. If we want to pass a driving test, we can find a driving instructor. The same goes for the mind. For me, the mind is our strongest asset, really, and how we focus on our mindset is key. And for me, in the world that we live in, sometimes people, they have this sort of theory. They go to a seminar, they read a book, and they think that's going to be happily ever after. For me, that should be the building block. You know, if you go to one of those motivational seminars,
that's the stepping stone. It's like the investment. But I think if people can get to a seminar and they've made that time, that's the great starting point. But whenever I do a workshop, or if I am going to a workshop, I now make the time in my diary afterwards. Like, I block time out for the next 3 months to actually implement, you know, what I've learned. And I suggest that people who, you know, come and learn things with me do the same, because it's really, you know, time, we're so busy that, you know, you can just keep doing the habits that you're doing because they're easy, but it's actually quite hard to change a habit and make it a better habit. And to pick up on your speaking, I mean, I hope if anybody watches the TEDx talk, so it's under TEDx Bristol, if they watch it, watch it with the eyes of, I didn't do any public speaking until after I left university at all, none. At school, my school friends and my uni friends are like, how on earth do you do that? Because I was the shy, embarrassed, bright red one that would like not speak at school. At university, I did all the group work. Like I did all the work so that my friends could stand up and speak, because I didn't want to stand up and speak. And then when I did my personal training exams and sports therapy, they said you need to do group stuff, and I said I'm never ever going to do group stuff, and they said you can't pass the exams unless you do it. And I had this like argument back and forth, and then I said, okay, so like I have to pass it. And I did that one group thing, and I was so scared, but in that moment I thought I can make a big over myself. And then I invested in a lot of professional speaking, like one-to-one as well as group stuff, and to do that TEDx talk, I've never prepped so much. And even since then, I get super nervous and, you know, vulnerable. And if you're in a group and I've not planned, you know, I still find it really hard. So I think, you know, when people are watching it think, I could never do that. Whatever it is you're thinking you could never do, I can guarantee you can do it, but it probably will take you more time and a little bit more investment than you thought. And that's normally the stumbling block. Because people think, I could never do it like TED Talk. Well, I never thought I could. Like it was on my list to do maybe in 10 years time. And then it suddenly arrived on my doorstep and I was like, well, it might not happen again. So I better take the opportunity and I better learn how to do this. So if someone's listening and thinking, I could never do that, but I really want to, like get in touch, because we can work it out. And you've got, without sounding corny, you've got one life. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And whilst having the plans is great, like you really don't know. And what happened to me like changed my life in 24 hours, turned everything upside down. And my 30s have had a totally different life plan to what I thought. And I can't even remember 2 or 3, you know, stages, gaps, years. And so it's weird, but then I just think, well, I'm still here. So I've got to live it. And it took me a while to get my head around that. And I coach some older people who are like 70s and even 80s, which is so inspiring. And the best thing about them is like, they just say, you've got to keep learning whatever age you are. And that's why they're coaching with me, which I'm like, that's a privilege. But equally, I coach people who are, say, terminally ill, or, you know, they've suddenly lost someone. And that brings it right back to home, that you don't know what will happen. So if you've got a dream or a desire or just a feeling to change, like start it now, be committed but compassionate with yourself, get your support around you, and it will happen. You'll surprise yourself, because a year goes quickly. And if you do tiny changes consistently, you've all heard it before, but if you'll surprise yourself. But then in amongst that, give yourself little breaks to just be, because I think I never used to do that. That's the bit that makes the difference to staying in awareness, not losing your sense of self, checking in with your wellness, not burning out. It's good to just be at times.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's really important. And for me, it's just like nutrition. You don't eat one good meal and you're healthy forever. You don't do one exercise session and you know, you're in top shape. You've got to keep doing the mental skills too, as well. And I think, you know, certainly whenever I go to, like, I'm a lifelong learner. I've studied since the age of 23, pretty much every day for hours a day, and I find time to study and learn. I love doing it. And I learn what I feel I want to learn at a time. And I'll enroll in a course, and I'll enroll in a module, a modality, and enroll in a master's, for example, if I feel that it's going to offer what I want. But also go to seminars, and people will sometimes see me in a seminar, like a Tony Robbins seminar, and say, what are you doing here? I'll sneak in the back, and I said, I need my Tony Robbins fix every 5 years or so, because it's one thing being a coach. It's a lonely world being a coach, being a therapist, because it can be a lonely world, and it's nice to share and learn from other people, even if you know and just reinforce knowledge, but to get the boost. And I think that the emotional state that we're in has a big impact on our quality of life. The better place you are emotionally. And one thing that was a good piece of advice I received a few years ago was with one of my mentors. They said to me, all we want to feel better for. Go to the place of feeling better immediately. And I said, and I thought to myself, well, is that not undermining the goal? And I thought, well, actually, you know what? I'm in a better place to achieve the goal if I go to feeling having the goal is. And that's what I really learned for me. Any goal I've got now, I really take time to feel what it's like having it, be it a car, be it traveling, be it a course I want to do. I go to the feeling first and get used to actually having it, and that helps to make that transition from identity point of view. But what you said is really important, I think, for me, because one of my philosophies, Kim, is not sink or swim, it's extend the comfort zone. I wouldn't push myself more than I can tolerate, and I do have those, what you mentioned there, my words, not yours, I don't put words in your mouth, but I do have those timeouts, and my timeouts around, say, playing sport, things I love doing music. I love music, in case people haven't noticed. And by doing that, I go to a different place. I dissociate from the world that we live in. It's my meditation, my mindfulness, so to speak. And for me, mindfulness can be just being in the moment. Because people sometimes, in my opinion, mistake mindfulness as having to sit there. And, you know, when these Zen concepts are thousands of years old, people, I think it's very difficult to adopt that thousands of years old concept in the modern world. I think we can do it. We can meditate and be mindful, but I think there's other ways of doing it too. We can go for a walk around the park, go for a walk at the beach, walk around the lake. That's being mindful. I
think that's, for me, that's like jumping in, so I apologize, but kind of saying when people are like mindful and thinking about personal development, a lot of people, before they get in it, and even when they're in it, they can get very heavy with it, like it's quite serious. And I'm kind of like, keep some fun in it, like keep some humor with your limiting beliefs. Like if you can make humor out of them and cartoons, like that's kind of my like childlike bit, but it's, you can then, it lessens kind of the impact of it. And your timeout doesn't need to be meditation. It can just be having pure fun in whatever that means to you. And then the meditation and the journaling. And so it's about like working out the strategies that will work for you. And I think probably the things that I would say from a couple of mentors, so I went over to the States and saw one of my mentors, and she was like, so what do you need to do to be really seen? And that resonated with me, because I think a lot of us, although we're all seen all the time, we're hiding ourselves, and you know, we might be running a pattern or a conversation that's not helpful. So then some of us isn't seen, you know, not all of us is present. So I think if someone's listening and they're thinking, you know, what are you not showing people that means you're not showing your full potential? And that's kind of like the other question that the other person who mentors me said, is like, what do you need to do to show and create your full potential? And I think that's probably a really good like question to maybe leave people with, of like, what do you need to do to show and give and be your full potential? And that can feed into many different things. And what does that potential mean to you? And for me, it was a really profound question, because you may have a huge aspiration around potential, but then he was kind of grounding it in, you've got to make it also real with your circumstances. Because I was kind of limiting, ironically, my tagline is unlock your potential, and I was limiting my potential because of my condition. And he flipped it and he was like, so what do you need to do to actually realize your current potential? And I think that that's a great question to ask people, is, are you allowing people to see you, or are you allowing yourself to see your true potential? And if you can work that out, what do you need to do to let that kind of out? And maybe you need some help kind of facilitating it. Maybe you just need some time out, because life's busy for all of us. So yeah, that would be a good question.
That's a very powerful question, and questions have the answers, and we ask better questions, we get better answers. And I think that's a key aspect for anyone watching or listening, and be mindful of your self-talk, and be mindful of what you're saying to yourself. And 98% of what we say, well, they say that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, Kim, rough estimate, and those thoughts we had yesterday with today, and the ones we have today with tomorrow. And sometimes you hear people say that 98% are re-offenders, in the sense that we don't make a conscious effort to change. And questions are quite useful to be able to navigate ourselves consciously to where we want to go, because we always ask the same questions. Why is what's happened to me, and why me, and how come me, and why is he so confident, why is she so this, and these, we want to interrupt that pattern. And questions are great to drive to a deeper structure of information, and to access those resources. And I think that's really powerful for sure. I'm mindful of time, very, very kind enough to come on board the show,
the time's great. I think probably the question that we've just left them with is really good. So if they write that question down and then kind of can mull it over, and then we don't go on too long so that my neurology doesn't make any sense to them. So to everyone watching, I mean, it's just been great, and I hope it's been useful. And as you said, they can get in touch with me and ask any questions if they'd like.
No, for sure, definitely, and you're on all the social media, Kim Ingleby. That's the I've got you on. So if people want to get in touch with yourself, is there any specific social media they can sort of, or they can email me if they want?
Just all of, I mean, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. It's all just at Kim Ingleby, and yeah, that'd be great to catch up with them. And the TEDx is on TEDx Bristol, November 2015. And the little book is called The Hound of Happiness, and it's on Amazon and Amazon.com, so UK and the States or wherever you're listening. It's on Booktopia in Australia and Barnes and Noble. So yeah, little book, Hound of Happiness. That would make me happy if people bought that, and I think it would help them to grow their inner happiness in a simple way too. Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, it's been really a pleasure having you on the show, Kim. Fantastic, and I'm sure we'll have you on the show again. That's for sure, and we'll definitely keep in touch. And I'm on your social media too now, and I see a lot of stuff that you're doing, the training and all sorts. Really, it seems to always be doing something, and you're busy all the time, and which is fantastic. Really, keep yourself in great shape, exercising and training and competing, and good for you. Long may it continue. Thanks for being on the show, Kim, and we'll certainly keep in touch. And thank you for everyone watching and listening. And I'm sure you got that other. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Jimmy. Take care. Thank you.